What's up, everyone? I hope you're doing well today. This is Raphael Garcia here with Schwann Humes for episode number 139 of the MMA Ratings Podcast. Today is Thursday, October 24th. We hope you are doing well, everyone, and we have quite a bit to talk about. So, Schwann, let everybody know how you're doing today.
Not too bad. Weather's getting kind of schizophrenic in Texas. One minute it's 90 degrees, then it's freezing cold rain, then it's 83 degrees again. It's nuts.
Listen, man, it's that time of year. We know what's coming. People been complaining about it being cold all or hot all summer. Now it's about to be cold. People gonna be complaining about that. Let's just make it through these next couple months and go from there.
That's the plan. That is the
Bet, bet.
plan.
So let's go ahead and jump right into it and talk about a couple of different things because we got a hell of a lot to talk about today. And we're going to be covering everything about the Nate Diaz situation, UFC 244. We're going to talk Conor McGregor. We're going to talk Paige Van Zant and Maycee Barber. Randy Couture had a heart attack today. That's kind of the first news I wanted to start with. But, he's doing okay. I've read his statement and everything. So people are out tweeting him, talking about his best wishes. And we're also going to look at Ben Askren and Damian Maia. But let's go ahead and start with Nate Diaz. So he released a statement today on Instagram that caught the MMA world pretty off guard, and everyone is kind of reeling from that. This is what everyone's been watching for the last few hours, and this is something that we have to talk about because it's huge. I'm going to start with actually reading Nate's statement because this is probably the most important part to this. Let me see if I can find it again, though. I'm not sure where it went. Give me 1 second to pull this back up. But I wanted to start off by talking about Nate's comments because it seems like the UFC 244 main event for the BMF title, or whatever the hell they're calling it, between him and Jorge Masvidal is now in jeopardy. The reason why it has been in jeopardy is because here's the statement here by Nate Diaz. I'm reading the quote here. I'm not going to make it out to New York City for fight week next week because they say I tested with elevated levels that they say might be from some tainted supplements. I call false on that because I only take whole food or natural food supplements. I don't even eat meat. So until UFC, USADA, or whoever is fucking with me fixes it, I won't be competing. I'm not going to play their game and try to hide it or keep quiet as they suggested. Let's definitely note that as they suggested. I'm not going to have my name tainted as a cheater like these other motherfuckers who keep quiet until after the fight just to say that they can get paid. Fucking cheaters. I don't give a fuck about some money over my dignity and my legacy. I'm not playing along with this bullshit. I'm not staying quiet and figuring it out after the fight. That's cheating. My fight game. So fight game, I'll see you when I see you. Sincerely, the realest, baddest motherfucker in the game. So that statement right there came out around 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, and people went ballistic because it's saying so many different things here. First, you have to look at UFC 244, which that main event is now in jeopardy. This isn't a notoriously stacked card, but this has been the fight that people have been kind of excited about for the longest time. Even, they're talking about The Rock being there to put the belt around the winner's title. They made up this fake belt that they had created. There's a lot of pomp and circumstance around this matchup here. But this is enough of a reason to give pause for people to have some type of fear around the situation here. So, Schwann, what are your initial thoughts about that comment there? And there's some specific pieces I want to break down. But let's just start with you talking about what your reaction was to this statement.
Well, I've always wondered because the Diaz brothers have always accused people of being on drugs or using steroids or something, and how everybody's been a cheater. So I always, in my mind, imagine what it would be like if, by some stroke of luck, one of them's got busted for steroids. And so when this happened, I was really interested to see what Nate's response would be. Would there be some humbleness? Would there be some contrition? Would there be some media spin? But if there's nothing else, these guys are consistent, and I have to respect them for their consistency because He did his typical "F you, go to hell, I'm not playing this game" sort of thing. And to be honest, I kind of believe him because, most guys, when they do it, they kind of spin it, they try to hide away from it. And he confronted it head on. He's like, no, there's no chance this happened. There's no supplement. There's no nothing. I didn't do it. And if you're going to believe somebody, you're going to believe somebody who strongly yet directly rebuffs the accusations. And that's what he did. So to me, he comes off as believable, much more so than other people who've been accused. And I don't know. I think a lot of people are being confused by what he's trying to say, because he said that he didn't want to go ahead with the fight. I believe the UFC told him, look, just go ahead with the fight and we'll get this straightened out later. But to him, he thinks that's cheating, because if you have the specter of a failed test over you, you shouldn't be fighting at all. Your main goal should be proving your innocence and legitimizing your legacy by proving your innocence and not being involved. And that's all he was saying. He's saying money's not more important. Getting this belt isn't more important. Being the main event isn't more important. What's important is me clearing my name and letting everybody know that that's not what I did. That's not who I am. And I'm not even going to entertain MMA or anybody in MMA until this gets straightened out. And when you think about how much money he's probably costing himself and how much pressure he's getting from the UFC to go ahead and fight with it, it just makes you that much more willing to believe him, because he's cost himself a pretty good penny. And with the win in this kind of fight, he could be even more of a big crossover star. So he's costing himself a lot, all because he feels he's innocent and he doesn't want to play in any sort of game until his innocence has been proven by somebody else. So I have to respect what he's doing. Financially, it's probably not smart, but you know what? You have to respect somebody who stands by their morals and is willing to take it on the chin to prove that they're innocent.
So you said a couple of different things there, and I really want to kind of talk about that situation, because the biggest thing that stood out to me was his statement about covering it up. And his exact line was, "I won't be competing. I'm not going to play their game and try to hide it or keep quiet as they suggested." So the UFC has a pattern with this. We saw it with the Jorge Masvidal, not Jorge Masvidal, my apologies. We saw it with the John Jones Vitor Belfort situation. We saw it with John Jones himself when they've moved fights around for him. They have, Hunt as well. They have a track record of doing this. We know this organization is about making as much money as they possibly can, and morals will go out the window 10 times out of 10. But how much of a blow is this to the UFC and USADA partnership if someone's digging around and they find out the truth about this? That's the biggest statement that stood out to me. People hold up the USADA process and they hold up these failed drug tests as there's some type of permanent black eye on these fighters' career and these fighters' legacy. You should, like, the way the fans talk about these situations is downright stupid, in my opinion. But we've seen them be willing to cover up situations in the past. 10 days out from what is probably going to be their biggest fight of the second half of 2019, I would not put it past the UFC to attempt to do this again to keep this situation under wraps. How big of a story is this small line out of his statement?
It's a huge story. I mean, it's basically calls into question the integrity of the UFC and the integrity of USADA, because if they know it and they hold the results until after an event, in theory, you're putting someone's life in jeopardy because you're letting someone who's failed a test and has an unfair advantage go into a cage fight. I mean, all it takes is one person to die and then find out somebody had a failed test. I mean, that would be that. I wouldn't say it's the end of the sport, but it'd be a huge blow, because the biggest promotion in the sport would be accused of being improper as far as enforcing rules and looking out for the safety of fighters. So this could be a huge story if there's any real paper trail or anything that somebody can follow to build a case against them. I mean, like I said, it wouldn't be the end of the UFC, but I can't see how it wouldn't set it 4, 5, 6 steps backwards. I mean, it calls everything into question from that point on. You can't trust them, and then you can't trust this organization whose job it is to not just catch cheaters, but to expose them to the public as soon as they get this information. So that just means those guys are being bought off, and that means the UFC isn't concerned about fighter safety or about a clean sport. They're concerned about their bottom line. We all know that. When you get proof of what you've always known, that's when the damage is really done.
Yeah, this is definitely a damning situation here, and I hope that someone dives deep into this aspect of the story, because this is something, in my opinion, that needs much more attention. Because imagine if they are not covering this up. I hate to say it like that, but trying to do their best to keep this fight together, regardless of what else is going on, and regardless of the fact that this man basically said someone told him to keep quiet so they can keep this fight together. And I think that is a major problem and a major concern. And I hope someone does a deeper dive into that piece. Let's talk about what's spiraled out of control since then. Because first off, now we got Jorge Masvidal. And there's conflicting reports about Jorge Masvidal being on this card now, whether or not this fight is off. There are some individuals that are saying that Leon Edwards has been tapped as a replacement, and that the UFC had him training to prepare for this fight just in case. Josh Gross just kind of refuted that, talking to Leon Edwards' management just maybe about 15, 20 minutes ago. If, let's say, that Leon Edwards is the guy to replace Nate Diaz for this fight, what does that do for the ramifications of UFC 244 for you? Is this still a pay-per-view quality main event? Is it more important now? Because, Leon Edwards has been on a tear. He's ranked, and he's someone that, if he gets this win here, he could easily be the next individual to face a champion in 2020. But from a marketability standpoint, does this fight change if Leon Edwards is slid into that main event spot?
Well, that's the thing about it. If Leon Edwards gets moved in, it's a more legitimate fight. It's a more important fight, but it's not a fight that captures the public's attention. It's not a fight that excites not just hardcores, but the casual fans. So financially, it's a huge blow to the UFC, because the hardcore fans tune in anyways. We don't have to worry about the hardcore fans. They're going to watch, they're going to show up, they're going to do their little thing. Where the money comes in is when you get the casual fans who don't buy every pay-per-view, who don't watch every fight, who don't read every article. The people who just tune in when it's a name they recognize and a fight they like. That's what they're missing out on. And the second reason it hurts them is because they were trying to prove, to a certain degree, like, we're beyond the Conor McGregor thing. Look, we've got these big knockouts. We've got these big stars. Look, Nate separated himself. He doesn't need Conor. Jorge doesn't need Conor. They're on their own thing. They're showing that they're going to make a big pay-per-view. They're going to headline an event without any world title, yada, yada, yada. Now the UFC is right back to where they started, where they don't have anybody who can excite the crowd. They don't have anybody who can pull in casuals. They don't have anybody who can make an impact on the mainstream media. They're right back to square one. They took one step forward to separating themselves, and now they're right back at square one, where they don't have any real ticket seller, any real pay-per-view draw, any real guy who draws butts in the seats. So they're right back where they started, where they need a transcendent star or someone close to it to help them get over the hump where they're at, where they make that 100,000 buys or this whatever rating they get. So it hurts them on two fronts. They've proven they can't, even though the UFC is big, they can't sell past a certain point without a star. And for the event, the UFC, it's taking a big hit. You might come up with a better fight, but you won't have a more interesting or a fight that generates as much of an emotional response as Masvidal and Diaz, which was totally organic. That was totally organic. That wasn't the UFC's planning. They just jumped on the wave of popularity, and now they've lost that as well.
They've lost that, but from a promotional value, does Edwards' name add any additional? Does he do anything? I don't even think he does anything for hardcore fans, to be honest.
No, there's hardcore fans. It's a better fight. It's a more interesting fight because Edwards is sharp. He's been active. Masvidal is sharp. He's been active. They both have an array of skills. They both beaten ranked guys. So it's a more legitimate fight. The people who want the purity of the sport, they'll love it. But people who love the purity of the sport don't keep the lights on in the building. It's the casual fans who keep the lights on. It's like the same thing in the music business. You have all these indie acts and these artistic acts and these deep acts. The ones who keep the lights on are the commercial acts. They allow us to get the hardcores and the indie acts out there because they're making so much money. We can take a chance on this this group or that group. Leon Edwards, nobody wants to see him fight Jorge Masvidal except the hardcore fans. Nobody's interested in it. Nobody demanded that fight. Nobody demands any Leon Edwards fight. He doesn't sell fights. He's not interesting. And he's not particularly exciting. He's a great fighter, but he has no draw. And because he has no draw, the UFC's bottom line is going to be hurt by this. Especially if some reason he fought Masvidal and beat him, all the momentum Masvidal built up is now gone. And he's right back at square one.
Yeah, it's definitely it has some ramifications across the divisions that I think that aren't worth it. In my opinion, they will be much better pulling the fight for now and figuring out what else they can do with that card. Even if I guess it's a card that is a pay-per-view event. They've done it in the past where they switched a pay-per-view event to a televised show and it's ate the money on the back end. I think they should do something like that to kind of reap in some goodwill with the fans, because throwing the Edwards on the fight card and expecting people to pay $65, $80 or whatever it may be to watch this show on pay-per-view isn't going to be worth it, in my opinion. There's another individual that threw his name into the hat. I'm not going to talk about Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington because we both know they're not taking this fight last minute. But there's another individual that threw his name into the hat. One, Conor McGregor. So we got a couple of different things to talk about with Conor. First and foremost, I think he does not need to even be in this conversation. Yes, if he stepped in to fight Masvidal on 10 days' notice, everybody would watch. I would watch. You would watch. People all over the world would watch. However, this man has some other issues he needs to be concerned about. And last week, I believe it was last week or maybe the week before, news broke that he is being investigated for a second sexual assault case. This is the second one since December of 2018. And as we talked about the first time, in Ireland, this situation supposedly occurred in Dublin. The situation there is that publications, media outlets cannot name the individual accused until they are actually charged. McGregor has not been charged with anything. But the information that has been released basically pointing out that this is a famous Irish sportsman that also has another investigation in the same area under his name right now. Of course, that leads everyone to Conor McGregor. Now, that alone should keep him out of any consideration for fighting anytime soon. Instead, what we got today is that he is talking about his preparation for return to action in 2020, supposedly fighting 3 times next year. Before we hop into that, let's talk about him and these allegations that are following him around. How bad does this look for the UFC to kind of ignore this matter when we have McGregor who consistently finds his way into a courtroom, and these 2 allegations are the worst. I mean, he's already settled once for smashing that guy's phone in Miami. I think it was Miami. He settled for that situation with punching the guy in the Dublin bar. He also was in court for the situation in New York. He was allegedly in a bar brawl in Dublin in the past. He jumped into that cage in Bellator and almost faced ramifications for that. Trouble is following this guy all over the place in a way that is almost disturbing to watch. How much of a black eye would it be for the UFC to do business with this man again, knowing what he has on his name right now?
I don't think it'd be any worse than anything else they've been involved in. I mean, what he's been accused of is much worse, but the UFC's had a history of hiring domestic abusers, people who have alcohol problems, drug problems, people who possibly been dealing drugs. You know, it's no more of a black eye than anything else. And to be honest, it's no more of a black eye than any other sport. Lots of sports have to deal with this. The only difference is since they're in an organization with multiple owners and multiple individuals and individual entities as far as companies supporting them, they have to answer these questions much more frankly. They can't intimidate the media. They can't push out the media. They can't just ignore the media. They actually have to have answers to the questions posed by the media. And the UFC doesn't have it. They kind of, even though they're supposed to be a legitimate mainstream sport, they operate on the exact opposite spectrum of the legitimate mainstream sports. I mean, if Ben Roethlisberger and other people have to answer these questions, how do you not have Conor McGregor? How do you have not some of these guys who are mid-carders not have to be front and center and answer questions about what they're doing? So I don't think it puts any more of a black eye, to be quite honest. I mean, Anthony Johnson's been known as domestic abuser. He's fought on a bunch of cards. Greg Hardy's still fighting. You just heard a bunch of things. I mean, at one point, BJ Penn was accused of some sort of sexual assault, and he still fought on it. And that was like a couple years ago, and he's fought in the UFC 2 or 3 times since then. So, I mean, what are we talking about? He was never found guilty, but he had multiple accusations.
So I think what's so bad about this matter is the fact that they're not even willing to talk about it. During the press conference today, when McGregor was announcing this quote-unquote return, and I want to put those in air quotes because nothing's been actually formally signed or announced by the UFC, one reporter, just one, asked a question about the allegations, and the host cut him off and didn't answer the question and wouldn't let him answer any more questions going forward. That's very telling to me. When you look at matters such as, like Greg Hardy in the NFL, the NFL made a statement and they took action. It may not have been the best action, but they took action. Same thing with the Ray Rice situation in the NFL. The NFL took action.
The Ray Rice, they only took action once they saw the video. They
Correct.
weren't really
Once they saw the video, because they knew about it beforehand. The fact of the matter is that they still took action. This is this man's second allegation for this situation, and he's had 3 other situations that have been handled in court. At some point in time, there needs to be a stop that say, "Hey, we need to get this solved before we are allowed to do business with you again." And the fact that they're not even having a conversation about that is really telling to me. The fact that they're not even willing to answer questions about that is very, very telling to me. And
let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Since the UFC considers their fighters to be independent contractors, is it who hasn't fought in almost a year now, close to a year? Is it really their job to have to answer questions? I mean, he's not scheduled to fight. He's not an employee. He's an individual contractor. Isn't it his job to answer those questions? In theory, I mean, Dana White can say, "Why are you coming to me? Like, I just provided the platform. He's his own business."
So there's a couple of different things there, because I actually wrote about this in reference to the situation earlier this week. You remember the UFC code of conduct policy that they had that no one really released. The interesting thing about that is there are a lot of people who believe that went away simply because of the fact that the UFC wants to keep that facade up that these fighters are independent contractors. If they have a policy in place that mandates how people behave outside of the workplace and offers up punishment for these individuals, that gives those individuals further cause to be considered employees. And you know that there's a snowball that comes out after that just rolls downhill that the UFC will not be able to stop. That's why a lot of individuals look at this situation and others and how they've handled them by not saying anything as the UFC saying, "Hey, distancing themselves from that code of conduct and treating these individuals as independent contractors," even though we all know that that's not the case.
Like I said, I don't know that Conor is actually legitimately scheduled with the UFC. He likes to call shots. He likes to demand attention. He likes to put himself in a position where he's being talked about. I haven't heard from anybody in the UFC that they've got a fight scheduled for him. I haven't heard that they've had any plans for him. I know they turned a fight down with Frank Yeager for him, but I don't know that they've had anything set in stone for him to actually fight. So even though I believe they would go with it, I can't jump on them yet because they haven't done anything. And all these issues he's had have happened while he hasn't been in the cage. He hasn't been in the cage and they haven't had anything scheduled for him. So how mad can I be at the UFC? He's really not an active fighter right now. All this stuff has been happening hasn't happened with him as an active fighter.
Correct. Well, yeah. Well, I don't know if all these situations has happened without him being an active fighter. Because if you're the champion, that's different. And I believe he was a champion for some of these instances, so that may be different there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's totally different. If it was in fact happening during that time, I don't once again know why it didn't come up. But if it did and it came out, then those people have to express that. They have to deal with it. But and like I said, maybe Dana knew about it. Maybe the UFC brass knew about it, but we're just finding out about now. Now, if they knew about it, then that's something else they hid. That's something else they covered up or paid to go away. And maybe they're letting it come out now because he's not as much of an asset to them.
So let's talk about that piece of it there.
Real quick, Raphael. This happens in other sports, like with coaches or certain players when they're having an issue with them. All of a sudden, drug tests fail, mysterious video comes out, certain crimes, certain things that happen, all of a sudden come back from the past 2 years ago that you never heard about. All of a sudden, get to light. Organizations do this sometimes when they feel somebody isn't an asset or becomes too much trouble, which makes you question the morality of not just of the fighter or the athlete, but the morality of the organization they fight or they play for.
So yes, these situations do occur in other sports. I think that they're handled differently in other sports as well. But what you said there was something interesting because you said that that we'll see how kind of like the UFC deals with this matter in the future. Conor McGregor is at a much less strength point when it comes to bargaining with the UFC. He has much less power than he did at one point in time, and it's not just because of his recent defeat to Khabib Nurmagomedov, but he has a lot less power than he once did, and that's why I find his announcement in air quotes about coming back in 2020 so interesting because now he's usually it would take Conor McGregor would fight 1 year and then he would dance around and talk about money, talk about every other thing other than getting back in the cage. But now he's sitting here plotting out some 3-fight 2020 plan where he may fight either Donald Cerrone or Justin Gaethje. He was talking about fighting either Nate Diaz or Jorge Masvidal and either Conor McGregor or or either Tony Ferguson and Khabib Nurmagomedov. Seeing him come out and make that statement lets me know that he knows he's in a position where he does not have nearly as much power with the UFC as he once did.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. He's not mainly because he hasn't done his job. He hasn't fought. The biggest thing that made one of the things that made Conor a star was he talked a lot, but he always backed it up. He was fighting a lot. He was fighting injured. He was fighting short notice. He was taking on the best that the UFC had to offer, and that's what legitimized his star power. Now that he's no longer fighting and he's coming off of a boxing loss to Mayweather and a fairly one-sided loss to Khabib, a lot of that mystique is gone. Now he's just another guy talking a lot. I mean, he's to a certain degree he's no better than a keyboard warrior because even though he's a legitimate fighter, he's not fighting and he doesn't seem to have any plans to fight. So now his activities outside of the cage are starting to overshadow his activities in the cage because he's just not in the cage. So he doesn't have any leverage. He doesn't have any leeway, not really, especially with the UFC's new ESPN deal and the fact that people's memories are exceedingly short. They don't remember the last time Conor McGregor walked in with that swagger and walked out with that swagger. Last time they say him walked out, he was coming off a loss and in an all-out brawl in the cage. So he doesn't have as much leeway. He doesn't have as much power. And with the kind of charges he's been hit with, every single one of these that comes up is a very serious charge, especially in the climate we have today. It'd be serious regardless, but in the climate we have today, these kind of charges take away any sort of mystique or power or fanboyism you generate among the people who actually make you as a star, the fans. So he's in a real precarious spot, and I think he's trying to get the subject matter back on fighting so that if he fights and gets some wins together, maybe he can get away from these allegations. Maybe he can get away and get the fans back on his side. Maybe he can get to a position where he's kind of calling shots again and maybe being protected by the UFC. Because the UFC will protect an asset. Conor McGregor has not been an asset for them for the better part of a year and a half, almost.
So let's talk about these potential fights on paper that we're looking at. Do you see any value in these fights? Is there any interest that immediately jumps off the page to you?
Uh, what do you mean with the potential fights he had listed?
Yeah, with the fights that he had listed, is there anything interesting? Like, do they get you excited about the opportunity of seeing him facing any of these men?
Well, the fact of the matter is, Conor's like Floyd Mayweather, or Canelo or Oscar De La Hoya. He'll make money regardless of whoever he fights. But with each guy, you have sort of an angle you can sell it with. With a Conor and a Cowboy fight, Cowboys comes a fight. He's exciting. He's got a big fan base. He kind of is a cult figure in mixed martial arts. So you have him fight Cowboy. That's a big seller. Cowboy's got some striking skills. Cowboy's a very good grappler. So you see avenues of victory for Cowboy, but you also see clear avenues of victory for Conor McGregor. So it's a safe fight for Conor. It's also a big fight because of who's involved, and it could make him and the UFC a lot of money. That would even though Cowboy's on a bit of a losing streak, his name, his cachet, and name value, along with Conor, will push pay-per-view buys. They could build that fight up very well. They could make that fight and make a lot of money off it. Against Justin Gaethje, it's the same thing. Only difference with Gaethje is Gaethje's closer to the title. So Conor versus Gaethje fight really could reestablish Conor as a world-class competitor. And that chance to reestablish himself will get his fans back watching, will get casuals watching, will get hardcores watching, and it'll get to the point where it's going to be like Floyd Mayweather. People aren't just showing up to support him. They're showing up to hope that Justin Gaethje shuts his mouth permanently and runs him out of the sport. So between those two names, both have value because Conor hasn't won a fight in over, year and a half, 2 years in the UFC? He hasn't won a fight in that long. So beating anybody who's been active legitimizes him and shows that he's back on the right track. Beating someone of Justin Gaethje's caliber shows that he's still one of the very best in the world, and it's a favorable style matchup. So both fights have value. Both fights make the UFC money. Both fights, if he won them, puts him in position to challenge for a title within another fight or two.
So, which fights would you rather see the most? Let's go through the three that he named. Out of Donald Cerrone, Justin Gaethje, which fight would you rather see?
Um, the Gaethje fight probably be the most interesting. I've always thought that he beats Donald Cerrone. I think Cerrone's got an array of skills, but I've always felt that Conor, with his body work and the accuracy of his counterpunching, especially with Cowboy's chin being extra shaky, I always felt McGregor could beat him. So that wouldn't be as interesting a matchup to me, outside of the fact that Conor hasn't been in the cage in forever. You don't know what he has left. The Gaethje fight is probably the money fight for me, the one that will get the biggest interest from me. But I would really like to see Conor fight someone else before he fights Gaethje. I'd like to see him have a fight, knock the rust off, then in his second training camp, go in against Gaethje and kind of have himself active, have him find a rhythm, have him kind of get back used to the strain and the drain of being a guy who's going to carry the card. Because even though the other guy's fighting on the card, he's the one who has to make it sell. He's the one who has to show the personality. He's the one who has to answer the hard questions. So I'd like to see him kind of get back in the groove, then go for a contender. I wouldn't want him to jump right into a Gaethje. I'd like to fight a Paul Felder first, Donald Cerrone, somebody a little bit lower down the rung, get the rust off, get sharp, see where he's strong at, see where he's weak at, and then go for the bigger name. Because the secret to Conor's success the first time, it wasn't just his talent, it was activity. He fought more than anybody. He just fought so much. And when you fight that much, you're super sharp. You're in super good shape. You're super confident. When you're fighting once a year, no matter how good you are, you're never quite as sharp as you should be, in my opinion.
Okay. Then the next two he mentioned were Nate Diaz or Jorge Masvidal. Who would you rather see him fight?
I mean, if I'm looking for just pure money, then I go for the Diaz fight. Diaz is the biggest fight. People will pay for that rematch anytime. That fight is a fight that sells anytime. It doesn't have to be built up. They already know each other. So Conor not being active isn't going to impact the fight any more than normal because these guys know each other inside and out. They've shared the cage for that long. They face each other that long. They train specifically for each other. But that's probably the biggest fight. The best fight, once again, if he fights Masvidal and he beats him, that actually makes him a legitimate contender. Because right now, Masvidal is closer to a title shot or closer to contendership, real legitimate contendership, than Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz is the cult figure who puts on an exciting fight, and he puts on spectacles, and that's what's kind of gotten him ahead right now. But if we look at Nate Diaz's record in the past year or two, he hasn't been spectacular. He's nowhere near a title fight. So if we're talking about legitimacy as a fighter and a contender, Masvidal's the fight to go. Gaethje's the fight to go. If you're talking about maybe just making money and reintroducing yourself to the fans and putting yourself in the best position to get mainstream media on your side and to really push those pay-per-view buys, then you go for Cowboy or you go for Diaz. I mean, there are two sides, they're two different sides of the same coin. Either one will reestablish you, but one reestablishes you as a legitimate threat. The other one reestablishes you as a legitimate pay-per-view seller and needle mover, as Dana White would say.
And then the third one was Khabib versus Ferguson. Out of those two, who would you rather see him fight?
Out of who? Ferguson?
Tony and Khabib.
To be honest, I don't want him to fight Tony and Khabib until he's had one or two fights. I thought the biggest mistake he made and the biggest mistake Ronda Rousey made when she came back, the biggest mistake all these people make is they go through these extended times off and then they jump right into a name fight with the biggest, the number one or number two person in their division. I've never understood that. Some cases it works, like when Dominic Cruz came and beat T.J. Dillashaw, or when John Jones came back. But outside of those rare occasions, 9 times out of 10, it's a bad fight for the name fighter. I'm always the person who falls on the side of being active and working your way up to the big names. I would want to see Conor, and not that I doubt Conor's skills, but I don't want to see him in with a Tony or Khabib until he's had at least two fights prior. I mean, he can take the fight, he can do whatever he wants. I would not like to see him fight a Khabib or Tony until he's gotten past either Cowboy and Gaethje or gotten past Diaz and Masvidal to at least get him ready for that level of competition. You can't, no matter how good you are, you can't just jump in against the best of the best and think you're going to dominate. Now, people say Floyd Mayweather did it, but Floyd wasn't fighting the best guys in the division. He was fighting pretty good guys in the division. Khabib and Tony aren't just pretty good guys. They're basically the elite in the division. And I don't see how you prepare for them without being active as far as fight. So I wouldn't even keep any of those guys on my board. Those two aren't even on the board until he wins two fights in a row.
Okay, all right, some good, okay, good. So let's move on because I want to talk about a couple of other topics from this weekend and just some other news going on. I want to take some time to touch upon this situation with Maycee Barber and Paige VanZant. So for those who are not familiar with the situation, Maycee Barber has been spending pretty much the last year or so calling out Paige VanZant any opportunity she can. She can't keep Paige's name out of her mouth. And Maycee just fought this past weekend, picking up a pretty decisive win at, I can't remember what event that was, but she picked up a pretty straightforward win. She's 8-0 as a professional. I think
Oh,
she's ranked
Gillian Robertson?
Julian Robinson. She's ranked number 8 right now. Let me look at that again real quick. Maycee Barber is ranked number 10 in the division. Paige VanZant is ranked number 15. She was not ranked before, and she was actually just slotted back into the spot. And everyone knows Paige. She's the woman that the UFC's been kind of riding high on because she has that crossover appeal. She was on Dancing with the Stars. She did fantastic there. That you see her frequently in a lot of commercials. She hasn't been competing as much because she just came back from a serious arm injury. She fought this past January, picking up a win over Rachel Ostovich. That was her first time fighting in a year. And in an interesting conversation Paige had with Ariel Helwani, she says she makes almost like $200,000 a year just from her sponsorships alone. She doesn't need to fight anymore. When you're making $200,000 a year from your sponsorships, she doesn't need to bet the jump and take any fight that is thrown her way or anybody that mentions her name. Any person on the UFC roster, male or female, would want a $200,000 annual salary just from sponsorship. So let's just go ahead and put that out there. But Macy's been continuously calling Paige out, making it seem like Paige is afraid to fight her. And, idiot MMA fans are talking about, oh, Paige is scared, et cetera, et cetera. But they're not looking at this from a business deal. So Paige Van Zant actually recently put up a social media post talking about she's willing to fight anyone at 115 or 125, anyone not named Maycee Barber, because she feels like Macy's being disrespectful. In my opinion, as I watch this situation, I continue to watch it unfold. Maycee just posted something on Instagram as we were on air, saying more of the same. This is getting really cringeworthy to me. And I would be totally on board with this fight if Maycee just came out and said, "Look, Paige Van Zant is making X amount of money doing nothing but promoting herself via social media. I want that same thing. I want that $200,000 that she gets every year, and I think the way to get there is by beating her within an inch of her life. I'm just as attractive as she is. I can be promoted by the UFC the same way she was, and I fight better than her, and I want to take what she has. But instead, she's going about this way that is just so cringeworthy, and like it makes me look at the situation like this is not pro wrestling. Like, stop it. Like, there's a point where you can tell where it's overly fabricated and overly manufactured. And this is definitely one of those moments, and is not making me interested in seeing Maycee Barber fight in any way, shape, or form. Have you been following the situation, and what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, people get on me about Maycee Barber because I've been very frank about her skill set and very frank about her limitations. I think she's a good fighter. I think she's got a lot of physical tools. I think she has sort of an attitude and a charisma that could carry her with a certain segment of fans if she plays it right. But the fact of the matter is, Maycee Barber wants Paige Van Zandt because she thinks it's an easy fight, and she just won't say it. And we've had this discussion before when we talked about how people were bashing Paige or bashing Michelle Waterson, and people like, they're not real fighters, they're not legitimate fighters. They did the same thing with Conor, and everybody says they're easy work or they're frauds. Sage Northcutt, they're frauds, and I'm a real fighter and they're not a real fighter. But every time those real fighters get a microphone in their hand, do they call the person out who's 5 levels ahead of them? No. They call the champion? No. They call the fighter who everybody's avoiding in division? No. They always go after the name fighter, even though they just got done saying they can't fight. They're a part-time fighter. They've got no heart. They're scared of me. Why would you, as a professional fighter, want to fight somebody who's scared of you, has no heart, and isn't properly trained to compete against you? Because you're no different than anybody else. You want to get paid. It's not about being the best. It's not about making a legacy for yourself. It's about getting the most money. Point blank, period. And nobody wants to have that conversation. They don't want to be that honest. And I've said this before. They are all frauds. This whole I do it for free, I'm a real warrior, blah, 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 blah. Y'all aren't like me. You work your regular jobs. No, you're exactly like me. You want to get a raise, you want to get a promotion, and you'll do whatever it takes to get it, even if it means taking the easier route to the money. Now, I don't hate you for taking the easier route to the money. That's what you're supposed to do. But don't tell me that you're some kind of unbeatable warrior and the rest of us don't know what your life is like. No, I don't know what your life is like. I can't take a shortcut to get a raise in my job. I can't take a shortcut to a better lifestyle. I can't go an easier route and take a lesser challenge to get myself ahead. I only can go and get a bigger challenge to get myself ahead. And that's what separates MMA from all the other sports. That's what separates combat sports from other sports. In other sports, you can't be the champion unless you beat all the higher ranked people in front of you and the defending champion. In sailing, in basketball, golf, anything, you can't do it. There's no shortcut. You can't just play the most popular team and get a title shot. You can play them, but you got to play the other 16 games and then the other 4 games, and then you get a title. Same thing in the NBA, but in combat sports, you get to pick and choose. And all Maycee Barber is trying to do is pick and choose so that she can get some notoriety, get some money, and hopefully her fame will knock her 4 steps ahead so that she will get a title shot. or get closer to a title shot instead of having to knock off the people who are legitimately ahead of her and legitimately better than her. And the fact of the matter is she's actually big enough and athletic enough and skilled enough that she could beat these girls. But she doesn't want to have to fight them. She wants to take a shortcut. And she just won't admit that. I don't know why she won't admit it. We all know it, but she won't admit it. She wants to take a shortcut. And before I finish, even though I don't know that Paige Van Zandt is dedicated to fighting anymore, this whole act that Paige Van Zandt is scared of her, Paige Van Zandt went 5 rounds, almost 5 full rounds with Rose Namajunas, and took one of the worst beatings you will ever see a fighter take. She didn't run from that. She wasn't scared. She didn't quit. She took Rose Namajunas' strikes better than Michelle Waterson and Joanna Jędrzejczyk did. She went out there and she went to war and took her beating and kept looking for more in every instant. She's fought Felice Herrig. She's fought Michelle Waterson. She fought for a round and a half with a broken arm. She may not be a very technical fighter. She may not be super dedicated to the art and the training of fighting. But once you lock the cage, very few people have the heart and mental toughness of a Paige Van Zandt. So even though I would feel that Maycee Barber would be favored over her, the fact of the matter is she's never fought an athlete better than Paige Van Zandt. She's never fought anybody mentally tougher than Paige Van Zandt. She's never fought anybody physically tougher than Paige Van Zandt. And she's never fought anybody in better shape than Paige Van Zandt. She is not Paige Van Zandt's toughest opponent. Paige Van Zandt would be her very, very toughest opponent ever in her career. So to just assume that she would walk through Paige Van Zandt just based on watching film and who they fought is freaking nuts. So to recap, Maycee Barber wants an easy fight so she can get money and move up the ranks. Paige Van Zandt is not nearly as easy as Maycee Barber is making her out to be.
And what's interesting about the situation is there's so many different angles she could take if she's trying to cut her way through to the top of the 125 pound weight class. I mean, look, Antonia Shevchenko is ranked number 13. Maycee Barber could beat her. I think she would definitely beat her.
Go
And
fight
you could fight her. You could fight you. Well, hold on. You could fight Shevchenko, beat the hell out of her, and then turn around and call out her sister, who's going to be there cage side. I mean, think of how much of a promotional step that would be for her to do that. You can fight Roxanne Modafferi. Lauren Murphy has been struggling as of late. There's so many women ahead of her that she could take a fight and have a better, more valuable bout with than Paige Van Zandt. Like Maycee Barber reminds me of Tommy Loren. She's, in my opinion, she's a Tommy Loren of MMA, and I just can't stand her.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I understand why she's doing it. Business sense, I get it. I get it completely. But the whole image of I'm a real fighter and you're not. I'm about this life and you're not. It's not the case. You can't be about this fight if you're taking what is on paper the easiest challenge. That's not what the real warriors do. That's not what the gladiators did. They didn't take the easiest challenge. They went after the best. The people we look up to went after the best. Now, I can't fault her for wanting to make money. I can't fault her for wanting to move up the rankings, but you can't. Paige Van Zandt, as much of a fraud as you want to say she is, anybody wants to say she is, she fought her way up. Now, when she got to the elite levels, she got her ass whooped and sent right back down, but she fought her way up. Paige Van Zandt won, 4, 5, 6 fights in a row before she got Rose Namajunas? How many fights has Maycee Barber fought? How many fights in a row has she fought?
2. Maycee Barber has had 3 UFC fights. Hannah Seifers,
3.
who's no longer in the UFC, I don't think. JJ Aldrich, and then the one from this past Saturday.
Yeah, and she's looked good in 2 of them, and she almost got knocked out in 1 of them. I'm not faulting her for that, but at the same level, Paige Van Zandt already fought better opposition. She fought Felice Herrig early when Felice Herrig had some heat on her, and she whooped her ass. Maycee Barber, all the fights she has won are fights she is supposed to win. They are technically, strategically, and athletically in her favor. Point blank, period. She hasn't done anything that she hasn't supposed to have done. So I like Maycee Barber. I get why she's doing it. I just wish she would stop lying to fans. You are not about that life any more than anybody else. You're just like somebody else trying to find a shortcut, trying to find a cheat code to get to your goal. Fine, I get it. I respect it. Just stop representing that you're about that life like that. There are certain fighters who are, and they'll fight anybody and everybody. You are not one of them. You're looking for the payday. You're looking for the shortcut. And you haven't even had enough fights against top-level opposition for me to justify. I get what Frankie Edgar wants a shortcut. I get what Dustin Poirier wants to get a money fight. I get what Justin Gaethje wants to have a money fight. I don't understand why Maycee Barber's calling for a money fight after her 3 fights, only really one of them over a ranked opponent.
I mean, you're spot on there, sir. You're spot on. So there's one other thing I wanted to talk about, and that's this weekend's main event contest between Ben Askren and Damian Maia. And I was really excited about this fight when it was announced. And as I continue to think about it, I'm like, what will this fight look like? How excited should we be for this contest? And let's kind of continue to break this down. Last night I sat down and I watched the fight between Jake Shields and Damian Maia from 6 years ago. Man, I forgot how long ago that fight was, but 6 years ago I sat down and I watched the fight from 6 years ago and kind of just broke it apart. And it was much more competitive than I remember it being. One thing, but on the ground, Maia definitely struggled against an individual who's willing to wrestle and defensively wrestle and wrestle out of scrambles like Jake Shields was able to do. Watching this fight, I got concerned about what Saturday's contest will look like because Shields is nowhere near the wrestler that Ben Askren is. Damian Maia he's built in a game plan, to get in tight on his opponent, get a grip, either pull guard or find his way to his opponent's back. But the situation is, what is he going to do once Ben Askren grabs a hold of him? Ben Askren is one of those individuals that once he gets a hold of you, there's not too much you can do. I mean, Khabib Nurmagomedov is like right there with him. What do you see this fight looking like? And is the Shields and Maia fight from 6 years ago a good blueprint in thinking how this bout will go?
Well, the biggest thing is I think Shields is more of a meat and potato wrestler, and he's a more structured grappler in his game. From what I've seen of Ben Askren, and I don't know everything about him, he's more of an unorthodox wrestler and unorthodox grappler. So it's really hard to say how he's going to respond to things. Other guys, because Maia's going to try and take him down, because Maia works best from top. He's not really good in neutral positions. He's not really great from the guard, mostly because people don't want to stay in his guard. They try to get past it. So he's usually good in scrambling to get top position, or he gets top position off the takedown. So when he attempts a takedown on Ben Askren, is Askren just going to sprawl and brawl him? I don't really think so. I haven't seen any confidence in Askren's hands or his striking. In fact, if they stay on the feet, I'd almost expect Damian Maia to knock him out. Or is he going to try and take him down when a clean takedown, or is he going to try and hit a scramble or hit a switch or do a roll through? Any of the other things I'm mentioning expose him to being submitted by Damian Maia, expose him to momentarily having Maia in a position where he's on top. And if Maia's on top, even for a second, he's going to have a chance to finish. I'm not saying he can. Well, I'm not going to say he can't. He can. I'm not saying he will, but that's what he's going to be looking for. Those opportunities where someone's giving up position or giving up their base to hit a reversal, hit a scramble to get on top, where he's hoping he can catch Askren in transition. Jake Shields played a really meat and potatoes, safety first grappling game with Damian Maia. He wasn't taking chances with his shots. He wasn't taking chances with his setups. He wasn't trying to go through roll throughs or anything of that nature. He got him down. He was trying to pass his guard, get to dominant positions, and just chip away at him. I don't know that Ben Askren's going to do that when Damian Maia comes after him looking for the takedown. And I believe Damian Maia will come after him looking for that takedown.
So what I saw that was interesting from the fight with Shields is that Maia wasn't looking for the takedown so much. What he was doing is he was getting into contact with Shields and then scrambling to the back. He took Shields back twice, I think in the first and the third round, off of what were definitely failed takedown attempts, but it opened up a scramble opportunity for him to get to Maia or get the Shields back. And that's, to me, in my opinion, that's his only route to victory, because I don't even think he can knock Ben Askren out. I think that once he get like, there's not going to be a long time for him to stay in striking distance. I think Ben's going to be able to close the distance down, the same way he did with Robbie Lawler. But he's not going to be as concerned about Maia striking as he was with Lawler, and he's going to close that distance faster. And he's going to be able to shut that down.
I think the thing about it is against Covington, Woodley, and Usman, all who aren't the wrestler and grappler that Askren is, Maia went after takedowns heavily against all three of them. All better wrestlers, all all competent grapplers. He aggressively pursued takedowns, and when he didn't get the takedowns, he was striking off the sprawls. He was striking off the separations. He was entering behind jabs and leg kicks. He busted up Colby Covington fairly bad on the feet. He got the Kamaru Usman on the feet pretty well, and even had a couple moments against Tyron Woodley on the feet. So I wouldn't think that he would subject himself to being on the defensive, because I just haven't seen him be particularly great off his back. Now, if he gets people in his guard, yeah, but I don't know that I've seen Damian Maia finish a lot of people from his back. Usually he gets a takedown, escapes, gets to someone back on the ground, scrambles, gets on top of them, and he gets to work. I don't know how dangerous Damian Maia is strictly off his back in those three fights. In those two fights against Usman and Covington, he really got the stuffing beat out of him late off of his back. So I have to believe that he's going to. I have to believe he's going to pursue the takedown. The question is, does Askren do a sprawl? Does he pancake him, or does Askren figure, you know what, I'm gonna meet him in his area of specialties, and I'm gonna out grapple him. I'm not just gonna out wrestle him. I'm gonna out grapple him. And I don't know that Askren is a step 1 through 5 kind of grappler or wrestler. I don't know that. Jake Shields isn't as good a wrestler, but Jake Shields in his grappling and his wrestling is very to the point. It's a very progressive wrestling style. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He goes through all the steps, and he's very careful to maintain a secure position. He's not trying anything fancy. He's not trying to spin around for a better position. He's not trying to scramble to get you off balance, to set up a leg lock or a choke. He's really trying to work position, impose his will, and chop you down. I don't know that Ben Askren's going to do that. If somebody comes after him looking for a takedown, I don't know that he's going to do that. I don't know that that's how he works.
Yeah, the way I'm looking at this is I definitely think that Askren isn't a better. Put it like this: if I had to take both Askren and Maia and put them in ADCC, which is the greatest grappling competition biannual event, Damian Maia would do better. Because he has a better understanding of, like, he's better from a technical standpoint when it comes to the grappling aspect of submission wrestling. Positional wrestling, though, I'm gonna give it to Askren all day, every day. I don't think that Askren is going to be. He's not going to be able to submit Maia. That's something I don't believe. But I think that he's going to be able to dominate and control the positions, kind of the same way that Damian Maia did to Gunnar Nelson, because Gunnar Nelson is another individual that has a high quality grappling game, ADCC quality as well. I think he's a medalist in ADCC as well too. And you saw Maia couldn't submit him, but he did more than enough to get to solid positions and to deliver enough damage to make it seem like, or to win the bout. I think Askren can do the same thing to him, but from a positional standpoint, and using his wrestling and his grappling to be able to get to those better spots. He also competed in ADCC, didn't do nearly as well as Damian Maia. Damian Maia won it in 2007 and got second in 2005. I mean, he is a competent grappler. Askren lost in, I think, the first round when he did ADCC. But from an MMA base, getting to a position, staying on top, and looking like you're working to score points, I think Askren has more than enough to win this fight.
I think he does, especially in the cardio aspect. I mean, as Maia's gotten older, he fades terribly late in fights, and even though he's a grappler, being in another grinding, active grappling match with a high-level grappler, high-level wrestler is draining on guys. It's just a matter of being more conditioned for it. Like I said, the main issue I have is how is Ben Askren going to respond when Damian tries to take him down? How is he going to respond when Damian starts trying to strike with him? Because as good as Askren's been, he has been taken down by guys who aren't good wrestlers. He was taken down by Lawler. It was a slam, but Lawler still got him to the ground.
It was a burning hammer, man. What you talking about?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Excuse me. And then he got taken down in one. And I want to say that who's that guy? Jay. He fought in Bellator. He's
Jay
fighting
Huron.
UFC. Yeah, I want to say that he took him down, or maybe got him in neutral position off a takedown. So it's not impossible to take Ben Askren down. It's not. But what separates Ben Askren from other wrestlers is his unique style, his unique rhythm, his willingness to take chances to get the superior positions. Once he gets them, he can maintain them quite easily. But when you're attacking or forcing him into neutral positions, he'll take certain chances to get to the dominant position. And what I'm thinking is Damian Maia is going to look for that and look to get to the back, get to the neck, get to the arm, and use the submission to get the position and then control him and try and finish him. I'm not saying it's likely. Based off wrestling pedigree alone, it shouldn't be likely. But we've seen Damian Maia take down guys with excellent takedown defense, Rory McDonald. We've seen him out wrestle guys, Chael Sonnen. I think John Fitch and Rick Story, while not the caliber of a Ben Askren, they are competent and accomplished wrestlers, and he easily out wrestled them, which shows that he's got a certain caliber of wrestling to a certain level in mixed martial arts. So it's not out of the realm that he's going to try and get the takedown. Once again, it just depends on how Askren responds. And if he comes in behind a jab and starts, kind of throwing and feigning leg kicks and knees, I think he could get a clean entry and get Askren to the ground, or at least get him to the cage, to a position where Askren is going to have to make a move that's going to expose him to being dragged to the ground or put in a position where he can be submitted.
All right, so we're gonna put a bet right now, $5 bet. I'm going to go because you named a lot of great wrestlers, good wrestlers, good collegiate wrestlers. From a wrestling standpoint, Askren is on another plane. I'm going to put a $5 bet on the line right now. This is something we're going to start doing for future shows where we had this back and forth. I'm putting a $5 bet on the line. Damian Maia does not score a takedown on Saturday. Now, pulling guard and getting a sweep does not count. He has to finish either a single leg, a double leg, some legit takedown, and take Ben Askren down. I'm putting a $5 bet on the table right now. Damian Maia does not get a takedown on Saturday.
Just for the art of the sport, I'll say that he can do it. I'll say that he gets takedown, some form, some fashion. He actually gets some kind of reactive or trip takedown and puts Askren on his back at some point.
It's not happening, but okay. We're putting it on the board right now, $5 bet. So before we close out today, there's a question that came in about retirement. And for those who did not see, Chris Weidman got knocked out for the 5th time on Saturday by Dominic Reyes. Stopped violently in the first round of their bout. This is the 5th time he's been knocked out. Luke Rockhold and Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman have been knocked out 8 times since that fight that they had for the the middleweight title all those years ago. So a lot of people are talking about Weidman and Rockhold that they should retire. However, every time we have this conversation around mixed martial artists, some people have a hard time telling them that it's time for them to hang it up. But after watching these two guys get the way they're getting knocked out more violently and they're getting knocked out faster every single time they come back out into the cage. Rockhold is always already talking about, hey, he may not be fighting again. Weidman released a statement yesterday, I believe, talking about he's not done. But is there a point, Schwann, where we should be okay with telling fighters, hey, the time is now, you need to walk away, and the UFC should stop booking them in fights?
Well, we don't have the right to, because it's really their career, and that's the thing that's always in control. It's like I compare it to being a parent. I have kids. After a certain point, I don't really have any say in what they do or how they do, because it's their lives. They had to live with the consequences. The only thing that happens is when they make these decisions, they can't come to me and, well, I wish you would have pulled me out. I wish you would have stopped me. You should have been looking out for me. No, dude, you made the decisions. You made the decision. You made the circumstance. Now live in the house that you burnt down. You burned down the house. Now you got to live in the ashes. It's not my problem to fix it. It's not my problem to get you out of it. It's not my problem to listen to how sad and how embarrassed you are about the circumstances you found yourself in. That's what it is with fighters. And a lot of fighters will sit there, and it's athletes. It's not just fighters, it's athletes. They'll waste their money. They'll take punishment. They won't take care of their bodies. They'll burn down relationships with coaches or organizations. And then when they write their book, or when they have nothing and they're getting interviewed by some writer or some newspaper journalist or some ESPN or Fox Sports guy, well, the UFC is just out for money, and the fans just turn their back on you when you start losing. And the people who were around there when I was going to the top weren't around when I was going to the bottom. Did they abandon you because they're not good friends? Or did they abandon you because they told you you need to retire because you can't fight anymore, and you said, I'm going to keep on going? So now you consider them traitors when they're just seeing things objectively. You can never tell somebody how to live their life or what to do. You can give suggestions, but just like you can't tell them what to do, that person can't come to you about their damage, their brain damage, their quality of life, the lack of money they didn't make for all the chances they took and risks they took after the fact. You made an adult decision. Now deal with these adult consequences. And Chris Weidman has been a guy who's been, as you said, repeatedly knocked out. And I told you before years ago, him and Luke Rockhold were not made to dominate for an elite period of time. I said Rockhold's an overrated striker. He's defensively terrible. He can't take punishment. And Weidman, I talk to people he trains with. He's not that great a wrestler. He's not that great a grappler. He's a big, long, aggressive guy who uses his length, his wrestling, and his forward pressure to mask defensive holes, lack of refinement in his offensive and counter striking, and lack of refinement in his overall wrestling game. I'm not talking about, I talked to some high school wrestler told me this. I talked to people who've been on the mat with him. I talked to world champion, all-American wrestlers who wrestled that dude. That's where I got my information from. And that's why I told everybody it was not going to last. And that beating his corner allowed him to take against Rockhold ruined him. And when they sent him out the round after being beat with an inch of his life, that also ruined him. It's not the one-shot knockout to kill you. It's extensive beatings. And they let him take one of the worst in the UFC's history. And that essentially, at that point, he essentially had the world-class beaten out of him. And ever since then, he has been unable to catch as well as he pitches. And he'll be dominating a fight, get hit, and it's over. And now he's to the point where he can't even dominate fights now. As soon as you touch him, he's getting dropped. So somebody needs to tell him he needs to stop fighting, but nobody's going to, because nobody wants to get on his bad side. Everybody wants to be loyal, and everybody wants to keep enabling him to continue to move forward. He moved up divisions 2 years too late, and like Gray Maynard, he's learning the appropriate fighting skills after his chin and his durability and his cardio has disappeared. Now he has no room for error when he's finally learning how to do the right things in a fight. Now he has no room for error. So every time he gets touched, he gets finished. So somebody should tell him this, but he's not going to listen. And it's not our job to harass him. It's not our job to insult him or question his intelligence. He made an adult decision. I will respect it. But when and if this goes badly, I don't want to hear the complaints about how the fans turn their back on you. The organization turned their back on you. Your friends turned their back on you. You turned your back on yourself when you decided to go against what common sense is telling you to do. But I also have to think about this. I don't know what other skills he has as far as making the kind of money he's used to making and being in the position he's gotten used to being in. So it's very hard to tell him to walk away from it. But if he doesn't want to walk away, cool. But don't walk away when those consequences come either. Don't start making excuses. Don't point the finger. You made an adult decision. You deal with the adult consequences the same as everybody else in the world has to deal with. Just because you're a fighter, you don't get any special exemptions.
Interesting thought. Interesting thoughts there. The last thing I want to ask about this is, from the UFC standpoint, should they take more of an onus in no longer signing guys to fight after like an extended period of time?
They could be moral about it, but the fact of the matter is the UFC is not in the feel-good business, just like any sport and any company is. I'm a really nice guy. Do you think Microsoft's going to hire me because I'm so wonderful? No, I don't meet the standards for what they want. The UFC wants people who can draw interest, and people who can build other stars, people who can fight a little bit. Chris Weidman can fight a little bit. He's a former champion, so we draw some interest. And if you beat Chris Weidman and do it impressively, you legitimize yourself. Yoel Romero re-legitimized himself by stopping Chris Weidman. Gegard Mousasi got himself a fat contract at Bellator by stopping Chris Weidman. Luke Rockhold became the middleweight champion by stopping Chris Weidman. A lot of guys have made their name and moved themselves up the division. Jacare beat him too by beating this guy. So he fills in every aspect of what they need him to do. Draw interest, potentially establish a new contender or build a new star. And also, he can fight a little bit. It's not their job to look after him. I mean, sure, as people, we can all look after each other, but it's really not their job. It's not their responsibility. It's his career. His cornermen have known him for years. His training partners have known him for years. Dana White owes him nothing. Dana White hardly knows him. I don't care how well he thinks he knows him. He doesn't really know him. They're not really friends. It's not really his job to stop him. And to be quite honest, I think if he tried to, outside of cutting him, I think Chris Weidman would try and seek legal options to get back in the cage and fight again. So the UFC, should they do it? Yeah, they should do it to Chuck. They should have done it to BJ. They should do it to a lot. There's lots of guys right now who need to hang it up. But it's not their job to. So if they don't do it, they're not necessarily in the wrong. They're doing their job, making money, building stars, moving the division forward. If at the risk to Chris Weidman's health, they don't have to sleep badly at night because there's other people who've known Chris for years and are his legitimate friends who he depends on who are allowing him to engage in this nonsense. So if Matt Serra can sleep well at night, if Aljamain Sterling can sleep well at night, if Gian Vellante can sleep well at night, why the hell wouldn't Dana White sleep well at night?
True. Interesting thoughts there. So we're gonna go ahead and close it out, man. Is there anything else you want to let everyone know that you're working on, or anything else you want to say before we close down the show for this week?
Yes, there's a couple things. Back on this, there's two things I want to talk about. First, the Aspen Ladd thing. She tried to get the fight overturned against Jermaine Durandamy, and I get why people say that the fight should be overturned. It was somewhat of a early stoppage, but I'm going to say the same thing I said on a couple shows before. Before this ever happened, when she fought Sijara Eubanks, I had a long, extensive conversation about how terrible her defense is, how predictable her offense is, and how simplistic her preparation and training is for. And I said that eventually Sijara is going to get tired, but until she gets tired, she's going to beat her ass. That's what happened. And after the fight, I said, when she faces a legitimate striker, she won't make it outside of a round. She has no ability to adjust. She has no ability to set up her strikes. She has no defense. She gets by on being tough and being physical and people being scared by her aggression and her ability to outlast them. As soon as she fights somebody with some accuracy who's skilled at striking, she's going to get wiped out. I said that before the fight with Jermaine Durandamy was announced. They announced it. You asked my opinion. I said she might not make it through a round. She does not have the skills. She does not have the corner work. She does not have the preparation. She might get knocked out quick. And then she got knocked out quick. And everybody's saying, well, anybody can get caught. No. Anybody can get caught, but she made 5 or 6 mistakes before she got caught. It was a terrible game plan. It was terrible execution. It was terrible footwork. It was terrible offense and terrible defense. She didn't have to end up in that position. She ended up in that position because she was not trained properly, she was not developed properly, and she was not prepared properly. How do you walk with your hands in front of your face and walk straight in on a world-class athlete who is also a world-class counter striker with world-class power and world-class accuracy? In what world does that make sense? It makes none. And that was her game plan. She got countered. Yes, former champion. A girl who hurts 145ers. A girl who's a champion in kickboxing and mixed martial arts. And you walk straight in on her with a high guard, no footwork, no jab, no setup, no feint, walk straight in. And you walk, if she pulls down your guard, hits you with a straight shot, you fall to your knees. Now, Jermaine Durandamy could have decapitated her when she was on her knees. She pulled back and walked away. She could have leveled her with anything she wanted. Her hands weren't touching the mat. She could have iced her. She held back, then they stopped the fight. So she could have finished her right there and put coffin nails in her. She decided, you know what, enough's enough. I'm going to pull back and show some restraint. Now, I understand why Aspen Ladd's upset, but instead of getting upset at the ref who called the fight earlier, why don't you get upset at the fact that you made 5 or 6 mistakes that ended up in that position? Because when you win a fight, you don't give the ref credit. When you win a fight, you don't give your opponent credit. But when you lose a fight with technical and strategical mistakes you made, now you want to look for excuses? How about you show some development as a fighter in the past 2 years, and maybe I'll consider you just got caught. But when you're doing the same thing you've been doing for almost 3 or 4 years, I ain't buying it. And maybe other people will buy it, and maybe other people have sympathy. I'm not one of those people. That was a terrible approach. You paid for it. Work on your craft better. Sorry. And I'm not saying this is an idiot fan, because everybody says, you're an idiot fan. What do you know? I don't know. I've had fighters ranked higher than her come to me for advice. I've had fighters who potentially would fight her come to me for advice. How would you approach her? How do you say this? What do you after she got knocked out? I had calls from a lot of camps being like, "Man, you called that. You called that 3 months ago. You said it was going to happen, and it happened." And she got embarrassed. So she needs to work on her skill set, not legal options. That's her problem. Secondly, and finally, Maycee Barber, very talented fighter. She's underdeveloped too. She's Aspen Ladd with a competent offensive striking game. She's not great defensively. She's in the transitioning period of her skill set. She's getting by on being big, strong, and physical with a decent offensive game. Her mid-range game isn't there. Her boxing game isn't there. She's either outside being effective, inside being effective. Mid-range, she's trash. And against the people she's had her dominant wins against, it's against fighters who do not match up with her physically and don't have the technical, defensive, or offensive skills to get to the spots necessary to exploit her. The one person who did gave her a hell of a fight because she throws in combinations. She met her in the mid-range. She did not allow her to stay at distance. She did not allow her to march her way through mid-range and get in close. And once she resisted and fought her, she put her in bad spots. Gillian Robertson doesn't have the skill set. She's not comfortable enough on the feet offensively. She damn sure isn't comfortable enough on the feet defensively. And she's not a good enough athlete to force the fight to the places she needs the fight to be at to activate her submission skills. It was a showcase fight. I don't care what Gillian Robertson is ranked. It was a showcase fight, and she was not prepared for it. She did not even attempt to attack Barber in the area she should have attempted to attack her in. I'm not saying it's her coaching's fault. I'm just saying that's what happened. It was a showcase fight for her, just like the Cyphers fight was a showcase fight. Was it impressive? Yeah, it's impressive. It's great. She won. Spectacular. I'm not taking that away from her, but let's not act like this wasn't a fight that she wasn't supposed to win. It was a fight she was supposed to win. They gave her that fight to rebuild her after getting beat pillar to post by her last opponent. I'm not taking anything away from her. Talented young fighter, has lots of potential. It's still young. It's still developing, but I'm not gonna ignore the facts. That's not my job. My job is not to ignore facts. And I have other camps calling me asking how to beat Maycee Barber too. And I told them before she got touched up in her last fight. And I told them what was gonna happen in this fight. All you have to do is pay attention to what's happening. Great young talent, great potential. She is not elite yet, which is another reason why she's calling out someone who is also not considered elite in the division because she knows she isn't and she knows she needs time, but she wants to get ahead, get a fight in, and take a shortcut instead of going the appropriate steps to develop herself and prepare herself for elite competition. So both of these fighters are in a similar stage because they're both fighters who lean heavily on their physical attributes and have done so to the detriment of the development of their other skills. They're going to be big names, hopefully, but both have a train of thought that could lead them to being derailed very soon if they get moved too fast. It's already happened to Aspen Ladd. It's very likely to happen to Maycee Barber if she is not very meticulous in her training and very meticulous in the fight she is taking. I am done with my rant now.
Hey, that was a hell of a rant, and that's why we have you on the show each and every damn week. With that in mind, man, we're gonna go ahead and close out. It's the weekend coming up. Don't work too hard this weekend. We will be back next Thursday. I will probably drop a podcast tomorrow about professional wrestling. There's a lot to talk about there. And yeah, let's go ahead and close it out, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate you for joining me again this week.
No problem, man. It's been a pleasure as always. You take it easy.
You too, sir. Everyone have a good night.